Friends who worked with Patrick during The Beast noticed something unusual. Sometimes, right in the middle of filming, he would suddenly disappear for several minutes. At first, people thought he was just taking a break. But the truth was far more heartbreaking. He was slipping away to vomit or trying to gather enough strength to continue. Still, when he came back on set, he was always smiling. He never showed weakness in front of the crew. He'd flash that familiar grin and say, "Let's go again." He wanted to keep pushing, keep going, as if sheer willpower could push back the illness. There was one moment, however, when the mask slipped, just briefly. During a break in shooting, one of Patrick's oldest friends went to check on him and found him inside his trailer. Patrick was curled up in a corner like a child, trembling. His clothes were drenched in sweat, his body shaking uncontrollably. He wasn't loud or dramatic. He didn't cry or scream. In a quiet voice, barely above a whisper, he said, "Just hold my hand." He didn't want someone to fix him. He wasn't asking for help or pity. He just wanted someone to be there, to stay with him through the pain, not as a fan, not as a coworker, but simply as a friend. That moment showed a side of Patrick the public had never seen before. This was a man who had once thrilled millions with his energy and charisma. But now, in the quiet of that trailer, he was just a man holding on to whatever he could. Eventually, filming on The Beast ended. The cameras stopped rolling, and the spotlight faded. That's when the cancer started pushing forward, more aggressive and more determined than ever. Patrick's health began to decline quickly. He could no longer hide it from the public, the press, or even from himself. January 2009 became a turning point, not just in his health, but in his entire world. Shortly after finishing the series, Patrick was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. He had developed pneumonia. For a healthy person, pneumonia is dangerous but treatable. For someone like Patrick, who had been undergoing powerful chemotherapy treatments, it could be fatal. His immune system had been wiped out. He had almost no defense left. Until then, Patrick had kept much of his struggle away from the public eye. But this hospital stay changed that. Photos of Patrick leaving the hospital began to surface. His once strong and confident appearance had vanished. He looked frail and thin. His cheeks were sunken. He had an oxygen tube in his nose. The world finally saw what cancer had done to him. There was no hiding anymore. Even as his lungs failed and his strength faded, Patrick kept asking his doctors what they could try next. He never considered giving up. His medical team offered something new, an experimental treatment using two powerful drugs, Abraxane and GMSAR. The combination hadn't been tested much. The risks were serious. The side effects could be harsh. But Patrick didn't blink. He said yes immediately. The treatment hit hard. He began losing his hair, something that affected him more than most people might expect. For years, Patrick had taken pride in how he carried himself. His look, his presence, his sense of control, all of that mattered deeply to him. Losing his hair was more than a physical change. It was a visible sign that he was no longer winning this battle. It made the illness impossible to hide, even from himself. To keep his pride, he wore wigs in public. He practiced smiling, even when he didn't feel like it. But he was getting thinner. His skin turned pale, his face looked hollow, and even walking across a room became difficult. Yet he kept trying. He still got up to ride horses. He still watched movies. He still talked about the roles he might play in the future. But his body was no longer cooperating. Those who were close to him noticed the changes. His speech became slower. Sometimes he got confused. He would stare off, lost in thought, as if he wasn't quite there anymore. The cancer wasn't just in his pancreas or his liver anymore. It had spread everywhere. His body had become the battleground, and it was losing the fight. That's when Patrick made a final decision. It was time to go home. Home. The final retreat. In April 2009, Patrick and Lisa left behind the busy world of Hollywood. They also left behind the cold, sterile hospital rooms. They went back to the place that meant the most to them, their ranch in California. The ranch sat among peaceful hills, with open skies and horses roaming free. It had always been their escape, their quiet sanctuary. For Patrick, this wasn't giving up. It was about returning to what truly mattered. At the ranch, life slowed down. Patrick tried to hold on to whatever normalcy he could. He still wore his wig when guests came to visit. He still smiled for the occasional photo, even when he felt like collapsing. He told jokes, with his usual dry humor. But it was clear, he was getting weaker every day. Lisa took care of everything. She managed the ranch, cooked his meals, gave him his medications, and stayed up through the night when the pain became too much. She had loved him since they were teenagers. Now, she watched the man she adored slowly fade in front of her. But she never let him feel like he was disappearing. She made sure he still felt like Patrick Swayze, the man she loved, not just a patient. Patrick still tried to be himself. Sometimes he stood by the fence, watching the horses instead of riding them. Even standing up for a few minutes took effort. He was exhausted. His muscles, once strong and powerful, had melted away. The man who used to leap across dance floors and surf waves now struggled just to walk. The media didn't stay away. Paparazzi parked outside the property, hoping for a glimpse. Eventually, they got it. A series of photos showed Patrick walking slowly beside Lisa. He looked shockingly thin, his eyes hollow, his skin pale. The headlines were cruel, unrecognizable, wasting away. But those images didn't capture what really mattered, the quiet strength inside their home. They didn't show the small victories, like getting out of bed alone. They didn't show the nights Lisa sat silently next to him, holding his hand. By then, words were no longer needed. Patrick was tired. And deep inside, he knew the end was close. He had fought for 20 months, holding off the storm for as long as he could. But now, the storm had arrived. The day he let go, Patrick's final hours. By the end of August, Patrick's health began to crash rapidly. The signs were everywhere. He had constant high fevers, violent tremors, and unbearable fatigue. One day, he collapsed completely. His fever spiked. His heart raced dangerously. Tests revealed the truth. His body was shutting down. His blood levels were off the charts. He had hypercalcemia, hyponatremia, internal bleeding, and almost no white blood cells left to fight infections. Lisa rushed him back to Cedars-Sinai. But this time, the doctors had no new treatments. No more options. On September 9th, they delivered the news no one ever wants to hear. There's nothing more we can do. Patrick returned home that night for the final time. The last days were hard. In a 2011 interview, Lisa shared what really happened behind the closed doors of their home during those final hours. The house was quiet. The air felt heavy. Patrick, who once danced across movie sets and brought characters to life, now spent most of his time in bed, barely able to sit up. The cancer had spread everywhere, into his bones, his nerves, and his organs. The pain never stopped. Morphine wasn't just for comfort anymore. It was necessary to keep him conscious. Lisa became his full-time nurse. She gave him injections of Dilaudid, adjusted the doses carefully, and tried to ease his pain without putting him to sleep completely. Patrick, always strong and stubborn, resisted sedation as long as he could. He wanted to stay awake. He wanted to be present, even if it meant suffering. On September 11th, Lisa's brother Eric and his wife Mary came to visit. The house was dark. The energy was low. Patrick drifted in and out of awareness. But for one moment,